Every afternoon at precisely 3:15, an elderly man stood outside Jefferson Elementary, leaning slightly on a worn wooden cane. He didn't speak much, just waited, calm, still, and focused on the front doors of the school like clockwork. His name was Mr. Harold Simmons, though no one seemed to know it. Most people just referred to him as that old guy with the boots. His clothes were plain, faded khakis, a flannel shirt, and a dusty cap that had clearly seen better days. But it was his boots that caught the most attention. Big, brown, and scuffed nearly to the soles, they looked completely out of place in the suburban schoolyard filled with shiny sneakers and brand-name shoes. It didn't take long for the students to notice. "Look at those boots," one boy whispered to another, nudging him with a grin. "They probably came from a museum," the second kid snickered. Laughter spread like a quiet virus. Whispers turned into jokes, and jokes into open ridicule. A few bold kids even began snapping photos of Mr. Simmons with their phones, turning his image into a meme with captions like "Lost Time Traveler" or "Forgot what century he's in." No one ever confronted him directly. The mockery was subtle, under breath, behind his back, but cruel all the same. Even the teachers seemed to ignore it. Some probably thought he was harmless, maybe just lonely. Others didn't want to interfere. After all, what harm could kids laughing at a pair of old boots really cause? But the one most affected wasn't Mr. Simmons himself. It was his grandson, Caleb. Caleb was in 5th grade, and every afternoon Mr. Simmons waited patiently to walk him home. At first, Caleb had been proud. He waved excitedly, ran to him, held his hand. But as the teasing increased, his enthusiasm faded. He began to lag behind when leaving class, pretending not to see his grandfather. He'd mutter "hi" under his breath and walk a few steps ahead, hoping no one noticed they were together. The old man never said a word. He simply smiled, nodded, and followed slowly behind. No one knew who he really was, no one asked, and no one cared. Until one day a teacher decided enough was enough. The laughter didn't stop. Each afternoon as Mr. Simmons appeared at the school gate, the whispers began like clockwork. A group of boys near the playground had even given him a nickname: Boots. Not out of affection, but as a joke. "Here comes Boots," one of them smirked, holding his phone up like he was filming a documentary. "Maybe those boots have fossils in them," another chimed in, sending the group into a fit of laughter. The jokes spread fast, even among kids who didn't really understand them. It became a trend, an easy way to get attention, to belong. And the more the old man ignored it, the bolder the kids became. Caleb, once proud to be seen with his grandfather, now wished he could vanish. He started taking a different hallway to leave class. He waited in the bathroom until most kids were gone. Some days he told Mr. Simmons to wait down the block instead of at the school gate. The old man never argued. He simply nodded, as if understanding more than he let on. It wasn't just the students who noticed the teasing. A few teachers saw the snickering, the subtle pointing, the way Caleb's shoulders slumped when he spotted his grandfather. But no one said anything. It wasn't their place, they thought. It was just kids being kids. Except for one teacher. Her name was Mrs. Halbrook. She taught history, and unlike most of the others, she paid attention to the details. One afternoon, while picking up papers from the front office, she glanced out the window and saw Mr. Simmons standing near the school sign, boots planted firmly on the sidewalk, back straight despite the cane. A few kids were laughing again, one pointing toward the boots. But Mrs. Halbrook didn't look away. Her eyes narrowed, not in annoyance at the children, but in curiosity at the man. There was something familiar about the way he stood, something practiced, something proud. The next day during recess, she found Caleb sitting alone at the edge of the blacktop. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. Caleb shrugged. "Sure." "You know," she said gently, "I noticed your grandfather the other day. He wears those boots like they mean something." Caleb hesitated, then said quietly, "They're just old. He never throws them away." Mrs. Halbrook smiled slightly. "Sometimes old things are worth more than anything new." She paused. "Do you happen to know if he was in the military?" Caleb looked up. "I think so. He doesn't talk about it." That night, Mrs. Halbrook couldn't stop thinking about it. She dug through an old binder she kept in her home office, a collection of veteran archives she used for class projects. And there, among yellowed newspaper clippings In black and white photos, she found a name that made her heart stop. Staff Sergeant Harold Simmons, Silver Star recipient, decorated war hero. The boots, the cane, the posture, it all made sense. And in that moment she knew it was time someone reminded the school who they were really laughing at. The next morning, the school bell rang as usual. Children shuffled into class, chatting about video games, snacks, and weekend plans. None of them knowing today would be different. In room 203, Mrs. Halbrook stood by the whiteboard, her arms crossed and eyes unusually focused. "Class," she began, "we're putting aside today's lesson. I have someone I'd like you to meet." The students looked at each other confused. Today's guest is someone who walks among you every day. You may have passed him, laughed behind his back, or ignored him completely. But once you hear his story, I promise, none of you will see him the same way again. The door opened, and in walked Mr. Harold Simmons. Silence. His boots echoed slightly on the classroom floor. Yep, check some more. Those same scuffed, dusty boots everyone had mocked. His cane tapped lightly with each step. His shoulders were straight, his chin up, his expression calm. He stood at the front of the room, uncertain but composed. Even the usual class clown said nothing. Mrs. Halbrook turned to the board and wrote in bold letters, "Staff Sergeant Harold Simmons, U.S. Army, Silver Star recipient." A quiet gasp rippled through the room. "He served in 2 combat tours," she explained, "including Operation Enduring Freedom. He was awarded the Silver Star for extraordinary bravery in saving 6 fellow soldiers during an ambush in Kandahar." A hand slowly rose. "Wait, him?" one boy asked, blinking. "He saved people? Like, really?" Mrs. Halbrook nodded. "Not only did he save lives, he was injured doing it. That's why he walks with a cane." The students stared at Mr. Simmons, stunned. "I wear these boots," Mr. Simmons finally spoke, voice firm but gentle, "because they remind me of the men I stood beside. Some of them never came home. These boots have dirt from 3 continents in their soles, and every scuff tells a story I'll never forget." A long silence followed. One girl quietly lowered her phone, which she had instinctively raised to take a picture, suddenly feeling ashamed. "I didn't come here to be honored," he continued. "I came to walk my grandson home, like any grandfather would. But I won't lie, it's hurt to be laughed at for something that means so much to me." The class collectively looked down at their desks. Caleb, sitting in the front row, wiped his eyes. Then one student, Tommy, one of the kids who had mocked the boots most loudly, stood up. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, his voice trembling. Another student followed. "Me too, we didn't know." Mr. Simmons gave a small nod. "Now you do." Mrs. Halbrook stepped forward. "This is why history matters, because heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear old boots and walk quietly among us." No one spoke for a long time after that, but everything had changed. After that unforgettable classroom moment, something shifted. The next day, when Mr. Simmons arrived at the school gate, there were no whispers, no snickers, no jokes. Instead, silence greeted him. But it was a different kind of silence, a respectful one. Tommy, the boy who had mocked him the most, was the first to walk up. "Good afternoon, sir," he said, offering a small salute he must have practiced in the mirror that morning. Mr. Simmons gave a kind nod, resting his hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Then came others. Students who had once laughed now held the door open for him. Some even asked if they could walk Caleb and him home. Caleb, for the first time in weeks, walked proudly beside his grandfather. His hand clutched Mr. Simmons's tightly, and there was no more shame in his eyes, only pride. The photos and memes stopped circulating. In their place, a new photo was posted on the school's bulletin board. It showed Mr. Simmons standing beside the American flag in Mrs. Holbrook's classroom, boots and all, with a handwritten caption by one of the students. "Real heroes don't always wear new shoes." The principal took notice too. A few days later, during the Monday morning assembly, she made an announcement. "Today, we recognize a member of our school community who has taught us a powerful lesson, not through words, but through quiet strength and sacrifice. Mr. Harold Simmons, we thank you for your service and for reminding us that every person has a story worth listening to." The students stood and clapped, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. That afternoon, the entire fifth grade class lined the front walkway to surprise Mr. Simmons. Some held small flags. Others had drawn pictures of soldiers in boots. When he arrived, they didn't cheer or shout. They simply stood as he passed, heads bowed in respect. He paused in the middle of the path, eyes glistening, and whispered to Caleb, "You see, buddy, it's not about how you look. It's about what you've lived." Mrs. Halbrook was there too, smiling softly from the background, knowing she hadn't just taught a lesson that week. She had changed lives. And Mr. Simmons? He never stopped wearing those boots. But now, when he walked through that school gate, people didn't see an old man with worn shoes. They saw a hero. Weeks passed, and the story of Mr. Simmons became a quiet legend at Jefferson Elementary. No one officially declared it, but something unspoken changed in the students. They looked at people differently now, not just at what they wore or how they walked, but with a curiosity about what they'd been through, where they came from, and what stories their lives might hold. Caleb began inviting his grandfather to his class presentations. He introduced him not just as my grandpa, but as Staff Sergeant Harold Simmons, my hero. And whenever Mr. Simmons stood up, the class stood with him, out of respect. Mrs. Halbrook, moved by the experience, launched a new monthly event called Living History Fridays, where veterans and elders from the community came in to share their stories. The first guest, of course, was Mr. Simmons. He spoke softly, but every word carried weight. At the back of the classroom, those old boots sat neatly by the coat rack, polished not with shine, but with reverence. One afternoon, Caleb asked his grandfather why he still wore them, even now. Mr. Simmons smiled and said, "Because they remind me of two things, the brothers I lost, and the second chance this school gave me to be seen again." The boots, once mocked, became a symbol of resilience, of humility, of unseen valor. Students stopped judging people by worn shoes or tattered clothes. They started asking questions instead of assuming. And more importantly, they learned to listen, to really listen, to those who'd walked long, difficult roads before them. Mr. Simmons never wanted fame. He never asked to be noticed. But by simply showing up, day after day, with boots that carried 1,000 memories, he taught an entire generation the meaning of respect. If this story touched your heart, we'd be honored to have you with us. Each day, we share quiet moments that remind us what still matters. You can subscribe below to join us.